Hello everyone, thank you for attending this CVision training session. This session we will cover in detail how to set up and configure a watch folder. My name is Shane Mitchum, I work in the pre-sales department here at CVision, and for the purposes of this demo we are going to use PDF Compressor 6.0. So first thing I'm going to do is actually launch PDF Compressor. So if you'll take a look at the job type up here, right now it is specified as batch compression. We certainly want to change that over to watch folder compression. So for those of you who don't know, watch folder is actually a hot folder. So as files are dropped into that folder, into an input folder, we'll pick those up and start processing them automatically. So we're going to walk through how to configure that right now. First thing I'm going to do is I have a folder here on my desktop. Now this could be a network folder, it could be a local folder. For the purposes of this, we're just going to use the one on my desktop. And as you'll see, I have an input folder, output folder, a failed folder, and a folder to store the processed files. So I'm going to take the input and drag and drop it into the folders to watch window. And that's going to pop up the watch folder item settings dialog box. First thing you'll see is an input folder path. It happens to be the one that I dragged in there. Next you'll see an output folder path, which actually is incorrect for the one I want. It happens to just append an underscore out to the output file, so I'm going to actually change that to output, so that way it matches my folder structure. One thing to note here is we do have the ability to include subfolders. So should you want to drop a folder as opposed to a file into the input folder, we can process that and pick them up and start processing them. Next you'll see processed input files. We give you the option to either move or delete those files. Now because this folder is watched and always picks up files that are in there to process, you are not able to keep the originals in the input folder. That is due to the fact it would create an infinite loop. So you either have to delete the original files or move them to a separate folder. So I'm actually going to move them to a processed location. And then again, you'll see on the bottom we do have the ability to move failed files. So I will also change that to reflect my folder structure on the left hand side. Actually, I named it failed, so we'll just change that. And I'm just going to select OK. And I spelled that wrong, so let me go back in there and just correct the spelling. Now my folders have been selected. Now no processing, no options have taken place yet. Let me actually blow this up a little bit. You will notice a couple things about the user interface. One is multi-processing mode. This will allow a user to process, happens to be 4 documents at a time. That number corresponds directly to the number of cores on your machine. So should you have a 4-core, an 8-core, or 12-core, that number will change with the machine that you are on. I'm going to actually select my settings, so I will, it looks like OCR is turned on. I will leave the settings the way they are. In a production environment, you certainly want to go through and correct all those settings. Next, we'll just take a look at the advanced options button before we go ahead and commit the changes. You will see we do have some queuing rules that can be applied. These are the default. We wait 5 seconds before picking up a file. We will queue up 20 files at once, and we will rescan the folder every 40 files. So to give you a little background on how the software processes, should you have a machine pointed at a watch folder, it could be on the network, it could be local, we actually queue files up. So if you have a 4-core machine, when it first starts, we'll pull 8 files, we'll process 4, and we'll keep the other 4 in a temporary folder awaiting processing. Once the first 4 files finish, we will then start processing the queued files. This is important when using multiple machines to watch the same directory. So should you have 2 licensed versions of PDF Compressor running on 2 separate machines watching one network folder, there will be no collisions as far as processing goes. Each machine will queue up their own files without any type of collision during processing. So that allows you to run a lot of documents at once and have very quick results for users awaiting the files as an output. You also see we do have some custom rules for processing priority. Should you want to process files in alphabetical order, smallest to largest, or oldest to newest, we allow you to define those rules here. Next tab that you will see is the Schedule tab. So it's by default monitoring that folder constantly. Now keep in mind, if you do have PDF Compressor installed on a machine and you have it processing the max amount of documents that it can, and you always have documents coming into the input folder, it will take up machine resources. So if there are 4 documents that are processing right now, the CPU would be pegged at 100% usage. We will utilize fully any processing power that we are given. What the schedule allows you to do is define when to monitor the folders and process files. Should you select this and you want to make it so it only processes on weekends, you can select Saturday and Sunday and have it watch the folders from, let's say, Friday at 6 p.m. till Sunday at 8 a.m. Or you can actually set it up so every night at 6 p.m. it starts and every morning at 6 a.m. it finishes. That way you allow 12 hours a day for processing. And then the last tab is the service status tab. In here you'll see there's configuration file contents. This will certainly change. We'll take a look at this in a moment once I commit my folders. But this also allows you to start and stop the CVision Watch Folder service. I'm just going to select OK for now. So the last remaining step in getting this set up is to simply hit commit new folders. And now the watch folder service has been updated with the revised folder settings. I'm just going to select OK. And I did have some input documents in there. They have since been processed and moved. So if we take a look at the output, it is actually working on them currently. You just saw 2 more documents pop up there. And this is the output file. So these are the documents that we get as an end result. Let me actually just open up another window so that you can see. I'll actually take the documents that are in the processed folder, which are the original documents. I'll show you one more time. Let me clear out my output. Simply going to take those processed images. They happen to be TIFFs and JPEGs. I'm going to cut them out of my process folder. As you can see, my input folder is empty. I will paste them in my input folder, and as you can see, this output folder starts to populate with those files as they finish processing. A couple things to note about watch folder processing. One is, should you ever want to change any of the settings, you must always remember to hit commit new folders in order for those settings to take effect. We'll just hop back into the advanced options button for a moment and go to the service status tab. As you can see, the watch folder configuration file has been populated with a watch folder pair, and within this it is the command that we use. So basically it's our executable file with the flags that we pass to it, and your input and output folders along with your processed and your error folders at the top here. We wouldn't expect a user to be changing this file on a regular basis. We only would suggest users changing this file after contacting support@cvisiontech.com and being instructed to do so. Just going to OK through this. One thing I mentioned throughout the demo is the idea of watching a folder over the network. This is something that requires another step of configuration, and we will cover that right now. So the first thing that you would need to do is bring up a run command prompt. Next would be to type services.msc, which will bring up your service controller. Once you have your service controller open, you must select CVision. Now there are 2 CVision services. One is a communication service, which is used in our communication processes to an FTP. The other is a watch folder service. As you can see, it is running. I'm going to stop that service, and I'm going to right click and select Properties. Once I've done that, I'm going to choose the second tab, which is Logon. This happens to be already configured. By default, it will use the local system account, which is not sufficient to process files over a network. To process them over a network, you must use this account, and you must supply it with domain admin credentials. So that way you will have permissions and the ability to read and write over a network. And like I said, as long as you have a licensed machine of PDF Compressor, you can have an infinite number of machines watching one watch folder. And that way all your documents will be processed as soon as they are dumped into that folder and processed quickly. That wraps up the tutorial on how to configure and set up a watch folder. If you have any questions on setting up a watch folder, please feel free to reach out to support@cvisiontech.com.